Casey, can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thanks. Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Thanks. Today is December 16th, 2024. It's 9 a.m. and this is Commissioners' Deliberation Meeting and proceeding number 21A-0141E. Hope everybody had a good weekend. And Mr. Eden, you want to get us started?
Yes. Morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory staff. This morning, I'll tee up your deliberations on the motion to approve the CEP delivery plan that Public Service Company of Colorado filed on September 6, 2024. At a high level, in the CEP delivery motion, Public Service argues that global and national geopolitical and market forces require some adjustments to the Clean Energy Plan, or CEP, to ensure that the generation and storage resources contemplated in the resource portfolio that the Commission approved in its Phase 2 decision can move forward. The company argues supply chains for generation projects have seen dramatic price increases, higher interest rates have led to increased financing costs, and solar developers continue to navigate import tariffs and face uncertainty regarding changes in federal policy. Since the company filed the CEP delivery motion, the Commission has received answer testimony and comments from several interveners, supplemental and reply comments from Public Service, and on November 7th, 2024, the Commission held a remote evidentiary hearing. And then after the hearing, numerous parties submitted statements of positions, or SOPs. Public Service categorizes its request in the CEP delivery motion into three components. Today, I'll be presenting for your deliberations component one, which primarily consists of a two-stage process in which renewable and storage projects could request price flexibility. Components 2 and 3, which I'll present at a later date, primarily deal with the thermal resources contemplated in the resource portfolio and a company proposal to increase its demand response capacity. Unless there are any initial comments, I'll start with an overview of component 1's price relief mechanism to put your deliberations in context.
Commissioner Plan, any preliminary comments, thoughts?
No, I mean, it's this is like the ongoing, never-ending process. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of really great answers. I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion today.
Yeah, what's that quote from Argo of all the bad options? This is the least bad. That's maybe where we're at. Commissioner Gilman.
Morning. Nothing really to start. I was just thinking, imagine Commissioner Plant started this in 2021.
Yeah.
Well, I've been here the whole time. But yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks, Mr. Eden. Appreciate all your work on this.
All right, Mr. Eden.
Okay. So as initially presented, component 1 consists of two stages. In stage 1, developers would be able to submit requests to an independent auditor, or IA, for price increases of up to 6%. The IA would have discretion to determine whether a projected increase was reasonable or whether it was due to an unreasonably low bid estimate from the developer. The IA would then submit all materials to the Commission. If the Commission disagreed with the IA's conclusion, it would suspend the price relief, which would start a process in which interveners and the company could respond prior to another Commission decision that would approve or reject the requested relief. This stage 1 price relief would be capped at 6%. In stage 2, projects could receive additional relief for a specified change in federal law, like the imposition of new tariffs on major equipment, or a reduction or repeal of current provisions in the Internal Revenue Code regarding production tax credits or investment tax credits, PTCs or ITCs. The stage 2 process would be initiated by a motion filed by the company or staff, or by the Commission on its own motion, which would describe the change in law and explain why stage 2 relief is appropriate. After considering responses to the motion, the Commission would determine whether to initiate the stage 2 relief process. If the Commission initiates the stage 2 process, then a similar IA review process would take place. The stage 1 and stage 2 price relief together would be capped at 15%. So if a project received a 5% increase in stage 1, it could only receive a maximum of 10% price relief in stage 2. Also, as proposed, Stage 2 is bi-directional and would require projects that previously received a price increase in Stage 1 to reduce their prices if, for example, a change in federal law reduces their cost. So I'll now focus a little more on the first piece of component 1, the Stage 1 price relief that is necessary prior to any change of law. In their SOPs, several parties, including public service, staff, the Colorado Independent Energy Association, or CIEA, and the Colorado Solar and Storage Association, plus the Solar Energy Industries Association, which I'll refer to jointly as COSA-SEA, argue the Commission should fundamentally modify the proposed Stage 1 process. While these parties differ on the details, the basic concept is to eliminate the IA review process and grant a technology-specific price increase. For instance, Public Service suggests a 1 to 3% price increase for solar storage and solar plus storage, and a 6% increase for wind. CIEA and COSA-SEA likewise asks that the IA be eliminated in Stage 1, and that the price increase be capped at 3% for solar, storage, and solar plus storage. CIEA would also support a 6% cap for wind. Staff recommends adopting CIEA's initial proposal, in which wind, storage, solar, and solar plus storage projects could request a price increase of 2 to 6%. Projects that do not require a Stage 1 price relief would be expedited and could receive a 1% price increase. Staff states this process should apply to both power purchase agreements, or PPAs, and utility-owned projects, and that the percentage increase should be applied to the project's net present value, or NPV, and not the cost to construct, or CTC, baseline. I'll note briefly here that the company opposes this recommendation, arguing that applying the percentage increase to the NPV of utility-owned projects could require the Commission to come up with a method that accounts for unit-specific considerations such as the timing of component purchases and taxes. For PPA projects, these parties generally agree that developers would submit affidavits from corporate officers to the company supporting the price increase, and the company would then confirm this repricing in a compliance filing with the Commission. For utility-owned projects, Public Service states it would provide sworn testimony in support of the increase to the CTC value in the follow-on CPCN proceeding. The individual performance incentive mechanisms, or PIMs, would be built around the updated CTC value, and the CTC baseline would be entitled to a presumption of prudence in the follow-on CPCN proceedings. The company indicates the Stage 1 price increase in the CPCN proceeding would be limited to price relief provided to the corresponding PPA bids. So, for instance, Public Service proposes a Stage 1 price increase of up to 6% for the PPA wind bid, so the company would not pursue greater than 6% for its utility-owned wind bids. Like I said, these parties don't agree on all the details, but they do all support eliminating the IA in Stage 1. In contrast, the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, the Colorado Energy Consumers, or CEC, and Climax Molybdenum Company continue to support the initial Stage 1 concept, in which an IA would verify project-specific price increase requests. CEC and Climax in particular strongly oppose any proposal that would result in price increases not subject to scrutiny or verification through the IA or a similar process. And I'll just note, it's important to remember that the pre-change in law Stage 1 price relief I just described is, as proposed, linked with the Stage 2 change in law price relief, namely the 15% aggregate cap and the bidirectional nature of Stage 2. So I'll pause here for your first point of deliberations, which is how to proceed with the Stage 1 price relief. This includes whether to retain the IA in Stage 1, bearing in mind how Stage 1 and Stage 2 are linked.
Maybe I'll go first, and been curious, really curious to hear what you guys are thinking. For me, there is significant evidence in this record, and most parties seem to agree that market dynamics and the geopolitical environment have evolved significantly since bids were submitted in March 2023. There's also evidence of several factors contributing to upward cost pressure, including supply chain constraints, policy uncertainty, and increased demand, such that I agree that we likely need to be somewhat flexible on pricing. There's also additional uncertainty with the administration change and what it means for clean energy project costs, which may also make the investment environment more challenging. So with that, I'd vote to adopt the general concept supported by public service staff, CIEA and COSA to eliminate the IA for stage one. Although I emphasize with a concern raised by UCA, CEC, and Climax, I believe that the IIA process will likely create considerable delay, which may result in additional price increases and ultimately loss of projects. So following the initial CIEA rec, even though it subsequently changed, I would limit the stage one relief to a 1% uniform price increase for all PPA solar, solar plus storage, and standalone solar storage projects, including the winning bids and those backup bids and supplemental bids that go through our approved process for advancing backup bids. In my view, this approach is the best way to be fair to both bidders and customers and is grounded in the actual updated bid pricing outlined in Hearing Exhibit 166, JWI 17, and the testimony provided during the evidentiary hearing. This is the best evidence on this record of what bidders might need. Removing the IA process and going with an across-the-board uniform 1% price increase could provide bidder certainty within a few weeks, quickly end this regulatory process, likely get most clean energy projects built, and would limit customer rate impacts to a comparatively small amount. I'd also allow the one wind PPA project to move forward with a 6% price increase, although I think that one's a lot tougher given the capacity factor and extent of the price increase. But overall, I think it's competitively priced. And again, I just think we gotta end the regulatory process. Regarding the going forward process, I generally agree with the CIEA proposal that to receive the stage one price increase, developers must present to the company affidavits signed by corporate officers providing narrative description supporting the requested price increase. I'd also add that these affidavits would need to condition stage one price relief, such that the price relief bidders receive in stage one counts against any price relief they could receive in stage two. So that's where I'm at. It's not pretty, Commissioner Plant, as you said, but I think given where we're at, it may be the best way forward. So I'm really curious to hear where you're at.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much where I've landed on this part of the deliberation as well. You know, I don't know what your guys' thoughts are, but it seems like this, you know, I mean, obviously stage two has to do with a lot of uncertainty over the next administration and what kind of policies are going to be put in place, what kind of impact that's going to have on the market and on cost of supply and all that sort of thing. But this seems to me to be really just a really slow process and the costs associated with a slow process. And I don't know how we try and avoid that in the future. But yeah, I think that, you know, your approach makes a lot of sense based on the testimony that we received. And, you know, also, as I said, the stage two is a really uncertain, an uncertain world that we're entering into. And so the bidirectional capabilities of that stage two remain, you know, something that I think we need to include. But at this point, yeah, I don't see any way to go forward without, you know, embedding in some increases just based on the cost of delay.
Commissioner Goodman, curious to hear where you're at.
Yeah, similar. I am somewhat comfortable with your approach. This is kind of a choice on what's the least worst option going forward.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, initially I wasn't very comfortable with any across the board increases. You know, I think what you've suggested is, and you know, what we've seen in some of the suggestions from parties is fairly modest and likely modest enough to be a recognition of, I think, what we all generally understand could be pretty reasonably caused. by the delays we've seen thus far and just general market conditions and supply chain constraints. And just the IA process proposal itself seemed problematic in that it had a fairly vague standard of review. It wasn't so clear exactly how rigorous that process even would be if it played out. And that was at the cost of multiple months more of delay in getting to any sort of conclusion, which could itself be costly, as you pointed out. And it was kind of at the same time very time consuming, but also incredibly restricted in individual parts of that, right? The time frame that the IA itself would have, the time frame that the commission would have, the stakeholders would have, were each kind of really short, yet it amounts to this long process. And so I think that could have led to just a really unsatisfying process under the guise of being more precise and perhaps not have actually gotten there. And then just risked a lot more delays and a lot more price increases kind of as a result of more of that. So with regard kind of specifically to the PPA projects, as you suggested, and in the technology categories, I think that's a reasonable path forward. The most reasonable that has been presented, I guess I would say. And then one other understanding as we move to, any projects that get the stage 1 relief, which is kind of these across the board, rather modest increases. My understanding is then as they go to stage 2, the suggestion is the stage 2 would be kind of bi-directional and necessitated. So if you take part in the stage 1, you necessarily will be swept into stage 2 if it ends up that more beneficial than harmful things have occurred that has the potential to correct in the other direction with regard to any relief from stage 1. So I think that's like my general thought and understanding. It's not without any risk at all taking this stage 1 relief in terms of what, if any, changes in federal law or policy would impact the project. So I think with those understandings, I'm as comfortable as I can be, given I was also very uncomfortable with all of the other potential options here.
I appreciate it. I think that's well said. Mr. Eaton, does that give you what you need on the PPAs? And maybe we'll go to the utility-owned generation, or would you like to help clarify things?
Just one cleanup on this item, and it relates to the bidirectional aspect of stage 2 that Commissioner Gilman was just discussing. Chair, you propose in the affidavits that developers submit that they kind of agree to the aggregate 15% cap, and advisors would also recommend that another agreement they expressly make in their stage 1 affidavit is that they would be subject to the bidirectional nature of stage 2.
That makes sense to me. Commissioner Plan, are you all right with that clarification?
Yes.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Want to keep going?
Sure. So you've all voted and discussed on stage 1 for the PPA projects. I believe currently there are also 4 utility-owned projects that are seeking component 1 relief too. There's 3 wind bids, and I believe there's 1 storage bid. Couple different issues to consider regarding the utility-owned projects. One is that the commission has traditionally required a follow-on CPCN proceeding where the commission can more specifically look at price increases or any price for the specific projects. And the company has put forth this concept that they would, instead of submitting like an affidavit that the developers do for stage 1, they would submit the support for their price relief in the CPCN component. And then another issue to consider is this dispute between staff and the company that I alluded to earlier, where the company argues that any price relief that it receives in stage one should apply to the overall cost to construct baseline, whereas staff argues that in order to be to treat utility-owned projects more similarly to PPA projects, the price increase or any price increase should be applied on the net present value of the utility-owned project. So happy to answer any questions that you have, but at this point, I'll pause for your deliberations on how to proceed with the utility-owned projects for purposes of stage one.
Yeah, so for those utility-owned projects that have not been already through the CPCN, like you said, I'd request that the company document the need for the stage one price increase in the CPCN proceeding. For the three utility-owned wind projects, I'd allow an up to 6% price increase, but no more. And given that they need to follow CPCN anyway, I don't think this approach would cause material delay and would provide some form of project-specific review that UCA, CEC, and Climax request. And just to be clear, the need for these utility-owned projects would be established, that is established in this proceeding, I'd view as carrying forward to the CPCNs. The primary issue would be to have the company document the need for the incremental cost increase and whether that warrants a presumption of prudence and adjustment to this construction PIN. So with that, I would not allow the company to use the CPCN proceedings to get more than the 6% stage one relief for the wind projects or the 1% for the other projects. I don't really feel strongly. I guess I lean towards the net present value approach, but again, really curious to hear what you guys are thinking. So, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same place. I think the CPCN is the right place for us to evaluate and put those kinds of parameters that you described, the 1%, the 6% on there. I do like the staff approach of trying to, I mean, one of the things, in the short time that I've been on the commission, one of the things that I know we've tried to do is set an equitable standard for evaluation of projects between the PPAs and the utility owned, and the MPV seems to be the way in which we can best accomplish that. I don't know if we need to decide on that here, or if that's something that we decide when the CPCN comes process comes forward. But from the discussion that certainly the staff had about the way in which the MPV would sort of make it a little more equitable with the PPAs, I'm sympathetic to that approach.
Commissioner Goman?
Yeah, likewise. I think one of the things I can get more comfortable with this approach in total if we use the scrutiny we already have in processes that already exist and will take place. It's not adding more time to the calendar. It's not adding anything, with regard to the PPA contracts. Well, I mean, there are no PPA contracts. We don't have any contracts signed, which is a massive problem. Nearing in on a year after all this was approved. So I think time is of the essence to get those moving. Yet with the utility-owned generation, there was always going to be a CPCN process. And so I just don't see sort of short-circuiting and agreeing on some value without the actual data in front of us with regard to that, because it doesn't seem as though there's any significant increased risk. We're already doing those processes. And it seems as though that's a totally appropriate process to really build a proper record to understand the validity and necessity of any cost increases. I would agree with you. I would say up to the amounts given in the PPA adjustments could be available in the CPCN. to kind of adjust the cost as well as any baseline for a PIM if the company, I think, satisfactorily proves that those cost increases are legitimate, totally unforeseen, at the time that they were bidding the projects. So I would agree on that general process that essentially this moves to the CPCN to really determine any presumption of prudence on those extra costs and what, if anything, happens to the PIM as a result. With regard to the discussion on cost to construct or net present value for the PIM, I think it would be, it strikes me that it would be helpful to decide that here. I think we have a fairly robust record between staff and the company on that point in this proceeding, and I don't see like belaboring that point or requiring them to get out again on the exact same point. I agree with each of you really that I think staff's position here is significantly more valid than the company's with regard to the actual costs ratepayers will see and kind of parity with how we're viewing cost increases on the PPA side of things. So I would be, I think it would aid the process too if going into those CPCNs, the company had a much clearer view on where the commission is coming down on this. Assuming the record is clear enough to make that determination, I think it is here. And that way we could have ideally a smoother CPCN process with that understanding going in that the cost increases should be based on the net present value basis, especially for those maximums as it compares to what the PPAs are getting. And I think especially, if the company realizes their bids can't work under that understanding, that's an important thing to realize sooner than later. And so with the record being fairly clear in this proceeding to make that decision, I think that kind of aids the process in setting the expectation going into the CPCNs of how we intend to view those price increases. So I would generally opt to do that now for kind of transparency purposes moving forward to ensure we don't have more surprises later.
Commissioner Plant, you okay with that?
Yeah,
I think I'm good with that too. Does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Eden? I know the next item is cleanup, so.
Yeah, I think I would just have one cleanup on specific to the CPCN issue here, given that the commission is deferring to the CPCNs, the issue of whether the incremental cost increases warrant a presumption of prudence and adjustment to the CTC PIM. Advisors would recommend making certain additional findings to increase the regulatory certainty. So we would recommend that the commission clarify that prudently incurred costs will be eligible for recovery, but that this doesn't impact the application of any disincentive under the PIM. And then also the commission should clarify that the market dynamics described in the CEP delivery filing may constitute extraordinary circumstances that warrant adjustment to the PIM. But again, this determination would be made in the CPCN proceedings. These findings are similar to what Public Service requested the commission make regarding its thermal projects.
You okay with that, Commissioner Plant?
yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I think as we present them, it's kind of a whole package of expectations for what this looks like moving into the CPCN, bundled with the concepts of essentially the maximum increase for each project type, as well as the net present value approach to consideration of that, to kind of bundle all in one place the best expectations that we understand going forward into those CPCNs.
That sounds good to me. Mr. Eden, does that give you what you need?
Yes, it does. So before we jump to stage 2, there's a few quick cleanup points on stage 1. First, the UCA seems to argue that the commission should require Public Service to investigate selecting additional solar and storage plus storage bids. UCA asserts that the large increase in future capacity need shown in the company's initial Just Transition Solicitation, or JTS, filings
I'd welcome a recommendation on this one.
Advisors recommend denying UCA's request. UCA has not put forth sufficient evidence that the additional bids it claims are more economical could move forward under component one, or that there should be a presumption of prudence for their acquisition. That said, Public Service could always seek authorization to pursue such additional projects outside of the JTS proceeding, especially if the company sees the potential cost savings or reliability benefit.
I think I agree with that recommendation. I think the problem is we don't know if those bids are still real, and I think there's interconnect issues given the interconnect queue mess at work. So, but I don't know, Commissioner Plant, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with the recommendation, and I mean, I think switching, at the end of a process to a different load projection for the basis of this process, I think is a little bit out of the ordinary. I think the JTS projections will be considered within the JTS, and it shouldn't just transfer to an existing and ongoing process. So I'd agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman?
I also agree.
As do I, Mr. Reed.
Thanks. So then the next cleanup issue is CEC's request that any incremental cost increase in component one must not be afforded that presumption of prudence per Commission Rule 3617 subpart D. CEC argues that escalating CEP costs were foreseeable and predicted by the IE report, and that the component one price increases would occur outside of the Commission's resource planning rules and competitive solicitation process. And again, I would have a recommendation on this point if you'd like me to proceed.
Please.
Advisors recommend rejecting CEC's request, given the competitive bidding process underlying the initial selection of these bids, the evidence put forth regarding the need for price increases, and the process and protections inherent in the stage one and stage two mechanisms. The component one price relief should carry a presumption of prudence per Rule 3617 subpart D. This will help provide Public Service the regulatory certainty it needs to quickly pursue these clean energy projects and avoid future delays and cost increases.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman?
I also agree.
As do I.
Great. So I'll turn now to the framework for stage two. And as I already described, in stage two, projects could receive additional relief for a change in law. The Commission determines whether to initiate a stage two relief process, and if stage two is initiated, then the IA review process I described earlier would take place. As initially proposed by Public Service, developers could request stage two relief by December 31st, 2025, or 18 months prior to the project's commercial operation stage, whichever is later. In addition, the Commission could require bidders to submit requests and documentation to the IA. To implement the stage two process, Public Service would incorporate language into the PPA contracts, and the company has provided this language already in its hearing exhibits. Although several parties, including the company, advocate to eliminate the IA process for stage one, there are no similar arguments for stage two. The parties seem to agree that the general IA review process should be maintained for stage two, although the parties again differ on the detail. Specifically, Public Service, staff, CEO, and UCA generally support the stage two process as initially proposed, although staff emphasizes that whether stage two price relief is permitted and the level of that price relief should be at the Commission's discretion up to a maximum of 15% inclusive of stage one relief. CIA argues for a more generous stage two price relief structure. For instance, CIA asks that the Commission extend by 1 year the December 31st, 2025 deadline for bidders to request stage 2 price relief, reasoning that changes in law are likely to pass in 2026. In addition, while CIEA supports a bi-directional stage 2, it argues that projects should be allowed to defend against a downward stage 2 reduction. COSACIA strongly supports the stage 2 price relief mechanism, but asks for an appeals process in which a developer could request commission review of a price increase that is denied by the IA. CEC states it does not oppose the IA review process so long as it is transparent and the results of the IA decision are subject to stakeholder investigation and challenge. CEC suggests that the period for reviewing the IA decisions should be expanded and include an opportunity for interveners to comment before the commission must issue a decision. CEC reasons that this will help ensure interested stakeholders have an opportunity to review, audit, and weigh in on any proposed price increase. So I'll pause here for your discussion or any questions on the appropriate stage 2 process. If the commission agrees with the general concept of the stage 2 process, I'll follow up after your vote with additional details, such as what guidance to give for developing an IA scope of work.
So I think I generally agree. I appreciate the company providing its proposed stage 2 PPA price language that was contained in hearing exhibit 166, attachment 20. And I support it, even though I recognize that the company is not asking us to expressly approve it. I'm also generally fine with the company's approach to the IA process for stage 2 and think we should adopt it. Although I would tweak the process somewhat to ensure more transparency and due process for interveners. Specifically, as the IEA suggests, interveners should have an opportunity to review and comment on the IA's stage 2 determinations prior to a commission decision. I'd suggest 21 days for intervener comments, followed by a 7-day period for public service and any impacted developer. Consistent with the company's request in its SOP, I think it makes sense for the commission to provide some guidance to public service regarding the specifics of how the IA will be used in stage 2. Ideally, the IA will provide some independent analysis of the documentation provided by the various developers and will produce an initial determination as to whether price modification is appropriate in a way that is consistent across projects, regardless, perhaps of technology or ownership. To ensure the IA is ready to go if and when needed, I'd ask Public Service to confer with staff and UCA on IA selection and development of a scope of work. Public Service would submit a motion to approve its proposed IA together with an IA scope of work, say no later than March 31st, 2025. Parties to this proceeding would then have 14 days to file any responses to the motion. As for the December 31st, 2025 deadline for developers to submit a stage 2 price release request to the IA, I'd stick with that date for now, but allow parties to petition for an extension as necessary or needed. So that's sort of what I've been working on with the team, but curious to hear where you're coming from, Commissioner Plant, and how you see it.
Yeah, that approach makes sense to me. I was sort of deferring to your expertise here and in terms of the timing, because I'm not sure exactly how that timing builds into, the development of a project, and you're just much more familiar with that. So I would support that time frame that you and the process that you laid out.
Commissioner Gilman?
Thanks. So Mr. Eden, kind of as I understand the time frame for stage 2, since the proposal I think was December 31st, 2025, or 18 months prior to the project's COD. It seems to me we could have individual projects coming through the stage 2 at different times, right? This isn't just one big process. It's kind of each project might be on its own time track with stage 2. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. The projects will have different commercial operation dates.
Okay, so they would be kind of bound by different deadlines and may well proceed with the stage 2 IA process at different timeframes?
Right. There is the proposal is December 31st, 2025, or 18 months prior to the COD, whichever is later.
Mhm.
And then projects are, presumably projects would still be coming online within the wrap of this proceeding, which only goes through December, or goes through 2028. So at some point there is a firm deadline where, in order for projects to come online within the wrap, they would need to request by a certain date.
Right. Well, probably one thing that works a little better with this IA process than the originally proposed stage 1 is there's not just this total crush on the IA and on the commission and the interveners. These might stagger a little bit to some reasonable level, which might actually make the process a little more reasonable to get through for every party involved. I was curious too, with regard to the proposals for the stage 2 change in law price relief. Is this still just PPA projects, IPP, or would this also involve the utility owned, or would that be dealt with in the CPCN?
As proposed, the stage 2 would also deal with the utility owned projects under the concept that the change in law might not occur by the time the CPCN is filed and adjudicated.
Understood. So there's kind of an automatic process that would follow with regard to that. Okay. Thanks for helping my understanding. I think I'm comfortable with the approach here for the stage 2 and with my colleagues' comments.
Does that give you what you need, Mr. Eden, or do you need more cleanup on this one?
Let me think here for a moment. So I wanted to, a couple points. CIEA argues that developers should be allowed to defend against price reductions in stage 2, given that stage 2 again could be bi-directional. And advisors recommend that the commission clarify that would be allowed, but they would need to do that through the established stage 2 process. And then on a similar point, advisors recommend that the commission deny COSACIA's requested appeals process as unnecessary and duplicative of existing avenues.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I.
And then I think one more point regarding the kind of more of the details of the IA selection and the guidance that the commission has agreed to provide the IA. I wanted to touch on Public Service's proposal to defer the costs associated with the IA and recover them through the Electric Commodity Adjustment, or ECA. Advisors think this proposal seems reasonable, but we would recommend that Public Service be required to set forth the specifics of its proposed cost recovery mechanism in the March 31st, 2025 motion that it submits.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Yeah, I think that gives us what we need on that point. For stage 2, the company proposes that if the commission or the IA rejects all or a portion of a requested and verified stage 2 increase, a project with an executed PPA would be able to terminate the PPA and receive a 75% refund of its committed security fund if it so elects within 14 days of the commission decision. Similarly, a build transfer project could terminate its contract with the company by paying 25% of the termination payment. In its SOP, Public Service states that the stage 2 price relief mechanism would not cover all potential changes in law, such as a full repeal of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. The company asserts that it is working with the developers to address such scenarios, including how posted security is treated under these circumstances. CIA states that it is imperative that the commission allow developers to recover 100% of their security if projects must withdraw due to a change in law that causes cost increases of over 15% for any project. CIA also asks that if the PTC ITC is repealed or a change in law results in a price increase of more than 15%, the commission should request full repricing from all CEP projects without the 15% stage 2 limit. COSACIA similarly asks the commission to direct the company to renegotiate bid security terms in any situation where stage 2 price relief is denied by the commission. In contrast, UCA argues against the company's proposal to partially refund the security deposits or other walkaway provisions. UCA reasons that security deposits provide a substantial incentive for developers to go forward with their projects or to minimize the requested price increase. So there's a few issues currently on the table as to what happens if stage 2 relief is insufficient, most of which relate to how much the posted security a developer can recover if the project can't move forward. I'll turn it over to you for your discussion, answer any questions, or I can also proceed to a recommendation.
If you could give us a recommendation on this one, that'd be great.
Certainly. Advisors recommend retaining public service's initial approach in which developers could terminate the PPA or build transfer agreement if their stage 2 price relief was denied and only pay 25% of the security deposit or termination payment, so long as the developer elects to do so within 14 days. Adopting the approach supported by CIA and COSACIA would put significant pressure on the IA and commission to approve the stage 2 requests without modification. On the other hand, UCA's approach for requiring 100% of the security deposit ignores the substantial uncertainty that future changes in law pose to CEP projects. If the commission determines that a project experienced a legitimate price increase of more than 15%, and this price increase is directly caused by a change in law, we recommend that developers be allowed to terminate their PPAs and recover 100% of their security payments, allowing this type of escape hatch in the event of a significant change in federal law that result in a more than 15% price increase will again encourage developers to execute PPAs and attempt to develop their projects. Advisors are wary of CIA's related request to allow full repricing and suggest not approving the request at this time. At some point, the commission may be better off allowing impacted CEP projects to fail and relying on the JTS to reestablish the market price for clean energy projects.
That approach makes sense to me. But again, love to hear your perspective on it.
Commissioner Goman.
Thanks, Mr. Eden. Yeah, I also agree with the recommendation. I think it's a fairly reasonable approach. I mean, I think in recognizing just how difficult this is to do and close out and execute with such uncertainty about what the policies may be and if those policies will actually change in a very significant fashion. So I certainly understand you know, the concerns in the marketplace right now, and I think we're doing our best to recognize those and have, you know, a somewhat fair process moving forward to really ideally keep these projects moving forward, keep them engaged, keep them in the system, but acknowledge we've got a pretty high level of uncertainty right now, so some adjustments, as you discussed, are warranted.
I agree with those comments as well as your recommendations.
Thank you. The next set of issues relates to the difficulty public service has had in executing PPAs, which is a necessary step that must occur before most of the renewable energy projects are constructed. As background, and as Commissioner Gilman already noted, the Commission issued its Phase 2 decision approving the resource portfolio on January 23rd, 2023. Sorry, 2024. While the Commission's first RRR decision didn't issue until a few months later in March of 2024, Public Service has yet to finalize and execute a single PPA. CIEA, COSACIA, and Interwest all argue that the Commission should act to prevent further delays in executing PPAs. CIEA asserts that Public Service's delay in PPA execution is a contributing factor for the need for price increases, and that Public Service appears to be understaffed and overwhelmed. Interwest similarly states that timeliness is the most critical factor in achieving the goals of the CEP, and that there have been significant delays during the contract negotiations due to the company's own actions. CIEA recommends the Commission require Public Service to submit by December 31st, 2024, a filing updating the Commission on all PPA negotiations and every month thereafter. CIEA also suggests the Commission direct the company to prioritize quicker PPA execution over holding the line on withdrawal outs and penalties for developers. However, CIEA also asked the Commission to take no action on the specific PPA terms presented by Public Service at this time. Now, Public Service asserts that it is negotiating in good faith with all bidders and warns the Commission against relying on the unattributed statements from COSACIA and CIEA. Public Service states there are issues outside of the company's control, such as the developer's need for price relief or insistence on receiving a price relief mechanism for future changes in law. The company also states that negotiations of long-term, multi-million-dollar contracts are always challenging. Nevertheless, Public Service proposes to submit monthly reports beginning in January of 2025 on the status of negotiations for all PPA and IPP build transfer projects. The company commits to continue this monthly reporting until all PPAs for the CEP are executed. I have a recommendation on this point, but I'll stop first for any questions or your discussion.
Why don't you give your recommendation, and then we'll come back with questions, comments, or vote.
Certainly. Advisors agree that timeliness is a critical factor for the CEP's success. We see this urgency as one of the main factors behind the Commission's decision to eliminate the IA for Stage 1. Nevertheless, advisors recommend denying CIEA's suggestion to direct Public Service to prioritize quicker PPA negotiations over penalties if developers walk away. Apart from the earlier decisions regarding the recovery of security deposits, advisors see little value in issuing vague directives to focus on executing PPAs at the expense of other contested items. As to CIEA's request that the Commission take no action on specific PPA terms, advisors and counsel agree that the Commission need not approve any specific PPA provisions here. And then regarding CIEA's request for monthly updates on all PPA negotiations, it appears that Public Service largely agrees with this concept. Consistent with the proposals from these parties, advisors recommend the Commission direct the company to submit monthly reports in this proceeding on the status of negotiation for all PPA and IPP build transfer projects. This reporting should begin in January 2025 and continue until all PPA and build transfer agreements for the CEP are executed.
Commissioner Plant, comments, questions, or vote?
Yeah, I'd agree with that approach. The only amendment I might offer is that we say by the 5th of the month, each month. Otherwise, I feel like we wait till the 30th. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable approach to me.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I think the approach is reasonable. I think, as you alluded to, this has been one of the more frustrating parts of this, and in processing kind of this delivery motion is understanding none of these have moved forward and really trying to figure out in retrospect and in real time, this he said, she said about what's really going on, why we aren't getting contracts signed. So I'm certainly hopeful the reporting will help. Mr. Eden, do we have any indication as to if those reports would be public, would be considered confidential?
I can get back to you. The company, I believe, offered a example of the type of reporting that it would provide, but I can't remember at the moment whether that example is redacted or not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know that was a very specific question on the spot, but I'm trying to figure out, I want this to be as useful as possible to really shed some light and transparency on the issue, get these things moving. And I understand, like, obviously there are certain aspects of this in any contract negotiation that may be confidential, but to the extent these counterparties are not in this proceeding, haven't signed NDAs, they're not going to have access to see what the company is saying about the negotiations if it's all confidential. So that could kind of really limit our ability to have like these be transparent and understand. So I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how do we. I think in a perfect world it would be public, such that the counterparties are seeing what the company is reporting on and could potentially flag if there are any issues. If the understanding of the process differs from what is being reported. I think it's part of my concern, just trying to figure out how do we ensure that this logjam really moves forward in as transparent a way as possible, as quickly as possible.
I was able to confirm that the example public service provides, the project name and the negotiation status is marked as confidential. So that would be redacted.
Can we make it not, so the discussions of the individual project would not be confidential as to the developer discusses? Can we put something like that in our order? So if, even if it's marked as confidential, as to regard to that developer, would not be confidential. What do you think of something like that?
What do you mean, like the developer could waive that, or you mean like the developer would somehow have access to see it?
Yeah, so if it was a developer A, the company was filing a confidential report on its negotiation with developer A, even though it's confidential, would have access to the report on on the company's negotiation with developer A. So if geez, it's probably fraught for an individual developer to contradict the company, but at least maybe the trade groups could be made aware of what's going on and help us if we need to intervene, something like that.
Perhaps. I mean, I'm just thinking like those developers aren't parties to this proceeding, very largely. So it's a little awkward with maybe it can just be, Mr. Eden, that we dictate that the developer should be copied on on whatever report is being
something like that.
to the commission, because like they're not parties, so I get the like confidentiality doesn't even quite apply to them, like they would not have access, but I wonder if we're able to just say that they should copy the relevant developer on whatever report's being submitted to the commission. I just want that. We kind of keep talking past each other if we're like, well, you have to report on the projects, but it's done in such a manner that developer can never see what is being talked about in the negotiation they're a part of in terms of status reporting. So I just worry we maybe don't get very far very fast if we don't have a process that works to connect those dots and having everyone see the same thing.
Mr. Eden, I guess rather than try and make up a solution to this on the fly, I strongly support Commissioner Gilman's concern and issue and of transparency, but perhaps you could be prepared to bring back a solution by our Friday deliberation on this specific issue and work with council and see if there's a solution. I'm just copying them, we're transmitting highly, confidential materials and the developers under no obligation. I don't know, but see if you can come up with a proposal that addresses the concern, which I totally support. Would that work for you, Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, there's just too much going on right now. Sorry, no real heads up, Mr. Eden, but the more I think about it, it's like it's only useful if I think the counterparty, who's the only other party who understands what is actually going on in the negotiation, can see what the company is reporting as the status and is going on.
Yeah, and that gives us an opportunity to weigh in and put, try and, if necessary, hopefully it's not necessary, but it enables a much closer to real time potential intervention if it's going off the rails. Commissioner Plan,
And I don't want to get involved in any of the he said, she said. I just want the
me
contract to be
neither.
appropriate and be signed, but that's not where we are today. And we're getting somewhat different stories as it stands today about why such significant delays up to this point. So I would like to just nip that in the bud in any way we can going forward.
Commissioner Plan.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that occurs to me is that the report that we're going to be getting is going to have multiple, multiple projects and multiple statuses. So it's just the one component of each one that would be shared, not the actual report. And I don't know if is it possible to have, I don't know, it's just something you can bring back, I guess, but is it possible to have both parties sign off on the component of the, status report? If that's something that could be done.
Yeah, and maybe there's a mechanism to do that in the affidavit. I don't know, Mr. Eden, and I don't know if the timing matches, but you could think about it, talk to council, and bring us back something based on the record and the plating you've seen from Excel, from public service. That'd be great.
Yes, I can absolutely be prepared to discuss that more on Friday. I also though wanted to circle back. Is the commission comfortable subject to the confidentiality issue being discussed on Friday, voting on the recommendation that I put forth as modified by Commissioner Plant regarding the specifying that the monthly reports would be due on the 5th of every month starting in January.
Yeah, if you think that's the right deadline. So I vote to support it, but we can keep going back. Commissioner Plant, do you vote to in support of Mr. Eden's framing and modification?
Yes, I do.
Commissioner Goman,
Yes.
as do I. So keep
Thank
going.
you. In its EP delivery motion, Public Service seeks variances from Commission Rule 3613 subpart I and Rule 3613 subpart J. Under Rule 3613 subpart I, a utility must execute contracts for resources within 18 months after the utility's receipt of bids to receive the presumption of prudence per Rule 3617 subpart D. This deadline was September 1st, 2024. In its CEP delivery motion, Public Service seeks a 6-month extension so that the new regulatory deadline to execute contracts is March 1st, 2025. Under Rule 3613 subpart J, a utility must file a proposal within 14 months after the receipt of bids that addresses the public release of all confidential and highly confidential information related to the bids. Public Service proposes to extend this deadline by at least 11 months to April 1st, 2025. The current deadline was May 1st, 2024. Public Service states that the bids are in a very sensitive state and may change based on the relief contemplated in the CEP delivery motion. COSA critiques the company's requested variance of Rule 3613 subpart I. COSA argues that Rule 3613 subpart I puts pressure on the company to execute PPAs and bill transfer contracts swiftly, and that granting the company's requested variance would reward bad behavior. COSA recommends the Commission deny the requested variance and reserve deciding whether to grant a presumption of prudence until after the CEP delivery bids are finalized. In the alternative, COSA argues that if the Commission grants the variance, the revised deadline for compliance should be as short as possible and not be subject to additional delays. COSA suggests the extended deadline should be December 31st, 2024. COSA also requests the Commission to confirm that bid prices will become public on December 31st, 2024. I'll pause here for your discussion, but I do have a recommendation on the requested variances.
Now, if you can give us your recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors agree that Rule 3613 subpart I ideally should incentivize public service to execute PPAs swiftly. However, advisors disagree with COSA's primary recommendation to deny the variance and defer granting a presumption of prudence until after bids are finalized. We fear that this lack of regulatory certainty could cause further delays. Likewise, COSA's alternative proposal to set a December 31st, 2024 deadline doesn't appear to be reasonable. Instead, advisors recommend adopting the March 1st, 2025 deadline the company proposes. The Commission should clarify, however, that any request to extend the March 1st deadline will need to be accompanied by a detailed description of public services efforts specific to each individual PPA and build transfer agreement. Advisors likewise recommend granting public services variance from Rule 3613 subpart J regarding the public release of bid information. The Commission should extend the deadline for the company to submit a filing to April 1st, 2025. Advisors agree with the company that the bids are in a sensitive state and it is too soon to publicly release information such as bid prices.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goodman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thank you. So this last topic for today is the numerous requests interveners make regarding how this proceeding should impact the company's currently ongoing JTS proceeding, which is another ERP proceeding in which public service seeks to obtain additional resources. Staff suggests the Commission consider consequences for bids that have failed in this process only to reappear in the JTS. For example, higher bid fees or stricter walkaway provisions. Staff does not recommend setting such consequences here, but encourages the Commission to inform bidders that withdrawing an approved bid submitted in this ERP only to rebid the same project in the JTS may result in heightened review or financial scrutiny. CEO similarly seeks to avoid a situation where developers could abandon its bid here, but propose an identical or similar bid in the JTS. CEO suggests that such bids could be subject to higher bid security fees, stricter walkaway provisions, or other measures that will increase the scrutiny of future contracts. UCA opines that the company and the Commission have been lax in ensuring that developers are not taking advantage of Colorado's ERP system. UCA recommends that any projects that pull out of this process from this point forward should be ineligible to bid in the JTS. Interwest recommends the Commission, in this proceeding, require public service to submit a separate filing in its JTS with an analysis of every point in the CEP where any delay could have been avoided and suggestions for preventing similar delays in the JTS. Interwest also recommends the Commission require the company to include in the JTS reasonable bid price expiration as a safeguard against unreasonable delays. If the company's review extends beyond the price expiration deadline, bidders should be allowed to refresh their bids without requiring an additional filing. Similarly, Interwest recommends the Commission, in this order, require public service to propose a PIM in the JTS that would reward the company for conducting timely portfolio reviews and executing contracts efficiently. CIEA and COSA make several sweeping suggestions for how to reform the JTS in light of the state of the 2021 ERP CEP, some of which are similar to Interwest recommendations. For example, COSA recommends setting a deadline for the expiration of bid pricing, after which bidders would be allowed to refresh pricing, and incentivizing contract execution via a PIM. One of the suggestions CIEA makes is to consider a best and final pricing opportunity after the levelized cost screening so that developers could sharpen their pencils and move pricing up or down. I'll stop here for any questions or for your discussion, but I also have a recommendation on this point.
Yeah, and this one, I probably would not explicitly link bidder behavior in this proceeding to how we treat them in the JTS. There's just been too much delay, uncertainty. It's not clear who's causing what, so I just can't see being punitive on this record. I would also save most of the going forward recommendations for the JTS process to that process and not try and do it here on a fairly muddled record. So that's my thought, but see what you guys think, Commissioner Plant. Where are you coming from?
Yeah, I could see both approaches. What we don't want to have is a situation where, you know, the bidders are, that much ahead of other parties in the JTS and just decide that they can sort of cut their losses and go into a new process. But I don't know how realistic that is once you've already expended so much effort within one process that they're just gonna, junk it and go into another one. That seems like it seems a little fatalistic. So, I would defer to your experience on this one, Mr. Chairman. I'd support your approach.
Commissioner Goman, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Plant. It's a little hard to know exactly who to blame for each step of the process here in each failed bid. I certainly think there's a possibility that if the same exact bidder bids the same exact project and good faith efforts were made to make that project work on behalf of the company, I could certainly see that parties might be arguing for greater scrutiny of those types of projects in the JTS, and certainly that's something the commission could and would consider then. I don't think we need to make any firm commitment at this point. But certainly the parties would be free to make those arguments, especially I think about the reliability of the bidders, the reliability of their pricing, things like that. And that's something the commission would hear when that comes before us. It's certainly probably going to be very fact dependent. To the extent bidders can make their bids work and make it happen in the CRP, I'd love to see it happen. And I think a lot of the parties probably would as well. So I could understand if people are concerned if they see the same exact thing crop up next time. And it looks like a failure in this process, and that's something we just have to consider and see how that looks. I generally agree with you on the rest, looking at recommendations actually within the JTS as to how to make that better. But we're not without this experience going into the JTS. I think there were some really significant shortcomings, many on the part of the company, many on the part of the process in this ERP that would really behoove us to find a way to avoid in the JTS. And so I certainly expect a lot of these discussions and arguments to make their way there to try to figure out how to really improve the process and avoid a lot of the pitfalls and a lot of the really significant delays that we've seen here that we all know at this point clearly cost money.
I would agree on your characterization of the process, and also appreciate the nuance that parties are free to argue that this bid or that bidder was unreliable in the past, but not having the commission put its thumb on the scale that way at this time seems appropriate to me. So does that give you what you need on this one, Mr. Eden?
It does. Thank you. With that, I think we've gotten what we need or what we expected to get from this component one deliberations. We will be prepared to bring back the remaining issues later this week, in addition to the one loose end, which is the confidentiality provisions in the monthly reporting. So thank you.
Before we go, I do have one more thing to bounce off you guys, not for a vote and not even really for a huge discussion today, but just want to put one thing in front of you for your consideration on Friday with the mainspring project, where I'm just really struggling with the two options in front of us. Either kill it or agree to do 50 megawatts at a higher cost. And based on this record, I'm concerned that current price and project size are a lot, particularly since the cost of the technology may fall over time. I'm also struggling with the size, which is more than twice the size that this developer has done to date, with perhaps most of the technology risk on customers. Although admittedly, we haven't yet seen the agreement between Mainspring and the company. At the same time, just walking away from the deal, as UCA suggests, seems unfair to the developer that has probably poured millions of dollars into this project and site that could have reputational impacts for us. And we do need new capacity in the San Luis Valley. So one idea that I'm hoping we can discuss on Friday is to move the details of this conversation to the already required CPCN that we get with regard to the Mainspring project. Not only do I think we need more details on the cost increase and the technology risk, but through our order, I'd ask that Public Service present as a potential alternative a purchase option and pre-construction development agreement with Mainspring. Under that approach, the company might have a unilateral option to purchase all the project assets at commercial operation at agreed upon matrix of prices, with flexibility to build anywhere from, say, 10 to 50 megawatts. In return for this option, and in addition to a purchase price paid at the construction or COD, I'd suggest that the utility compensate Mainspring for all its verifiable, reasonable third-party development costs at the time the option was signed. Going forward, as I see this type of deal unfolding, I'd also have the company reimburse Mainspring its verifiable, reasonable third-party development costs to keep the project going. To protect the utility, it could perhaps request accelerated cost recovery of these expenses through the ECA. For me, this could allow the due diligence to continue without having customers commit to the full 50 megawatts now, which seems expensive in an environment where costs may fall. While we don't have a sufficient record here to order this directly, I think the company and Mainspring could use the CPCN process to sharpen their pencils, shrink the project, and clarify risk allocation. I'm just trying to get to a reasonable approach for protecting customers without breaking the bank while still exploring the benefits of this technology. So I just throw this out there for your consideration. I'll give this language to Mr. Eden so he can talk about it with you, and just seeing if we can find a middle ground between 50 megawatts at a relatively high cost now, or just, killing it and not moving forward as UCA suggests. So it's been a struggle for me, and I'm shooting for a middle ground, and we have the CPCN thing anyway. So I don't know, Commissioner Plant, if you have any questions, I'll give this script to Mr. Eden and see what you think, and see if you have any comments on Friday.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll save any comments for till Friday, till I have a chance to look it over. Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner Goman.
I have nothing yet on that, but I took a lot of notes, and I look forward to a more precise transcript of what you said.
Fair enough. Mr. Eden, that's all I got for today. Did you have anything else?
No, I think we're good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks all. With that, we're adjourned, and I guess see you tomorrow morning on the next one. No rest for the weary. Have a good day. Bye.